Okay, everybody, so we're going to start in about 2 minutes. We're going to seat our panelists down here. Everybody grab a seat wherever you want, just, anywhere you want to sit. I'm going to let you... Actually, maybe let Stephanie sit in the middle so it doesn't look like a guy fest.
Okay, that's yours, Stephanie.
Yeah.
I know, and I've got the skirt problem. So many issues.
Okay. Well, thank you all. You were for hanging out after lunch and being here. I'm going to not try and look at the beautiful view of Alcatraz and look at the panelists instead here. So the topic is audience measurement and data, the big picture, which is exactly what we're going to talk about. What's going on with it? We've got representatives from a few companies that are doing a whole lot of interesting stuff in the space, and I'm going to start at the end. We even have two people with accents, so it'll be like, I sound like Stefan, right? But anyway,
my New Jersey accent will come through, but don't worry about it.
Yeah, okay, but we'll start
Very
off with
noticeable.
Rob Jason at the end there. And just introduce yourselves and we'll make our way back.
Sure, I'm Rob Jason. I look after research analytics for a USIM, a mid-sized independent media agency.
I'm Jay Prasad. I lead the TV and measurement business at LiveRamp.
Right, he has not worked at VideoAmp for 3 years, logo notwithstanding.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Freed. I'm the CMO at Fandom, which is the world's largest fan platform. You've all been there, even if you don't know it.
Hey, I'm Tom Keaveney. I'm the president of 605, a measurement and analytics company.
Hi everyone, I'm Charbel. I am heading product management, data product management for Vizio, including TV viewing data for Inkscape.
Okay, so I'm going to start with you, Charbel, because you're right next to me. So one of the things we keep hearing is, I hear a lot from brands is like just how difficult data is on streaming and measurement. Like why, so is that true, and how it's really sort of holding things back and everything is a problem and nobody ever wants to work together? Like, is that why? So first, like, why is it difficult? And then if it is, why? And if not, why not?
I'm really still asking this question. It is difficult. So here's what we learned so far in the last couple of days, right? We noticed that everybody's talking about the fragmentation in terms of streaming. Videos watched on CTV, different environments, different applications, right? Having one single data set that can help planning, targeting, and measurement across these audiences that are fragmented and watching on fragmented applications or environments is a challenge. It's a challenge from an identity point of view, being able to combine all the data sets together and have a wide scale of identity that is reliable. It's a challenge. And the second one, compounding error across all the different data sets that are being gathered together, it makes it even a bigger challenge. When we're doing this on Vizio side, on the TV, between linear and streaming, or even within the streaming environment, it's an easy for us because we have the identity of the users and we can use it across these environments. When we start expanding the same services for planning and measurement, even within the Vizio population, but within the household and across devices, it becomes a little bit more challenging. There's still some work to be done on that.
So I just want to quick. So
Yeah,
do you
I just want to say,
go.
I mean, it's interesting because I think about this as a technical problem, and I see it as a problem that was solved a long time ago. So the issue is provisioning of the data, right? It's access to the data. It's not turning it into a homogeneous data set that you can work with across multiple use cases. It's an access problem. It's not a technical problem.
So what do you, by access, it's just people don't have access to the right data?
Yeah. I mean, there are commercial data sets, Charvel, yours in particular, that people license, but we're also dependent on, when you talk about particular programmer provision streaming services, we're reliant on getting data from them. So that's the difficult bit. The technology, the data science to make it homogeneous is not a complex problem. That's been solved. It's access.
Gotcha. Do you want to respond?
I mean, I understand what he's saying, but it's solved with certain caveats, right? It definitely solved. I don't want to go into technical conversations here, but we all know when you try and combine multiple data sets, the coverage of identity, it's a challenge, right? I'm not saying it's impossible, but there are still some work to be done in that area. That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah. Now, Jay, you might know something about identity.
Yes, we have been spending quite a bit of time and resources to basically deal with two things. One is there's various different, let's call it viewing data sets out there. I hate to use the word panel, but you have a Vizio viewing set, right? I'm seeing Claudia, there's a Comcast viewing set. Each one of these basically are able to create a match, an identity, right? In the Vizio case, we household the Vizio TVs. More and more emails are kind of coming through, right, as people register for their Vizio TVs, and so we're able to match that. We do the same thing with subscriber files with the MVPDs, for example. And then we can layer in a CTV device graph, right? So we operate a CTV device graph, which is kind of an industry collaboration. It's a give-to-get graph. It's up to 248 million devices in the US. And then there's just everyone else's identity pools. So can you put this all together to have a holistic view of a household? Yes. But it's hard to do when you give it as everyone's responsibility to do that. So I think a next step would be, how do you create a household graph that anyone in the industry can reference and then make their own decisions as, I agree with this householding, these attributes, these devices, and I'll use that, or I'm going to modify based on that. But it is basically a technical problem that is, for the most part, solvable. Let's say it's on the way to being solved. And then if you want to get a true like cross-platform, cross-streaming device, and linear measurement data set, then yes, now you have some business stuff to solve along that way.
Right, so, but you're talking households as opposed to individuals, though, right? Like, individuals is a whole other ball of wax.
It depends on the use case, right? Yeah. Most TV measurement and specifically TV attribution, from a brand's perspective, they want that householded because they want to know, did they sell to the household versus the individual? But if that should change, then you can still have individual identity within a TV household, right, that still views a Vizio TV.
Gotcha. Now, Stephanie, you can talk to us about sort of the quality of some of this data from.
Yeah, I mean, certainly I'm not this deep into the technical aspects of all of this, and certainly haven't been for a while. But I feel like it's interesting because, you know, I feel like we spend a lot of time counting people and figuring out how we're reaching people. And we used to talk about, from a ratings perspective, you would lose people in the ratings when people streamed, right? And we didn't want to stream programs because we lost people that we were counting and monetizing differently. We were still monetizing them, but we couldn't have a program rating number, and we didn't know as much about the popularity of a given program. So the counting becomes a problem across all of these different platforms and understanding what your reach is and your frequency, et cetera. But there's a lot of benefits too that you get, and there's trade-offs, right, in terms of the quality of that targeting and what you know about the people that you're reaching, which I think in a streaming environment, you have so much richer data about who you're reaching as opposed to when we actually knew and we were able to count every single person because they were all watching on television. It was like, you know, men 18 to 34. And so I think, you know, for us in terms of thinking about the benefits of the ability to target at that level, and I know there's a lot of discussion about how you do that across platforms as well, but there's a lot of benefits as well to the streaming environment and all these different ways to reach users that we just don't, I guess, talk about as much. We always talk about the problems. So, you know, that's something that we think about.
No, that's interesting because it ties into something we're going to get to in a little bit, which is quality of the programming as well. But now we've heard all these brilliant theories on the quality. We're going to hear from the guy who actually is charged with buying and selling this stuff. So what's your take?
I think I don't hear a lot of demands from clients. I've not had a conversation with a client in 10 years about what the currency is, about what they're going to be buying. I think the last time may have been a C3 conversation about how many days of clients aren't asking about that. They might be that they are interested in their ability to take their own data and then monetize that data as they hear and see a lot of stories about privacy and limits on third-party data that are going to come into play. So they want to know about how we're joining together data sets to identify households to create a graph that's going to tell them what the true reach frequency of a campaign is going to be. And but I've yet to have a conversation about how we quantify what that impression is going to be defined as with a client, because that's just not conversations that they have. So
Now, let me just before you go. Is that because they don't know to ask, or because they just don't
they
care?
don't care. I mean, they want to know. They want to know outcomes. They want to know how much I spent and what's the outcome of that spend. And so we're in a position where we're creating, it seems like, better walled gardens within the streaming world, and that's going to be a problem. So our focus is to try and create. At the moment, we're at the point where we're good at identifying first-party data, translated into, hopefully good lookalikes, but, that process is a little opaque. But we create some lookalikes around first-party data. We send that to our different vendor partners, whether that's Trade Desk or Facebook or whoever else is streaming. And then, we've got to then think about what's the crossover reach. We've got to model that. It's modeled reach duplication. That's not great. That's just, based on a panel data, which is not ideal.
That's changing.
Is it?
Yes.
Okay.
If the advertiser is running persistent identity underneath the targeting that they're using across the board, even into the walled gardens, I guess the beauty of the buzzword of the moment, whether it's identity or clean rooms or these types of solutions, is that you will have to do less modeling.
I mean, it's true if I spend all my money with OpenAP, or I spend all my money with Julian at Paramount, or if I spend my money with a supplier, I get a true reach frequency. But if I'm not, then I'm going to end up modeling it on a panel data.
You wanted to say something, Tom?
Yeah, I just can't believe we're talking about clean rooms as a standalone topic. For us, all it is technology and a couple of business processes to onboard data quickly. It's not a panacea to all of the problems in the industry. It's just a technology. And actually, I feel vendors like us should be managing those decisions. It's cool because we can bring data on quickly, run aggregated analytics and offboard it. But yeah,
Those are the analytics that give you cross-walled garden or whatever you want to call it, capability to measure. That's the main purpose of them, is
Absolutely.
to safeguard the data, have privacy around it, but then also give advertisers this type of analytics that they have not been able to get before.
And it ties it back to Rob's point. I think what it facilitates is performance metrics. So instead of transactional counts to affect a currency, a willing buyer, a willing seller, and a medium of exchange, it's focused on real measures around performance. So, at its most simplistic level, showing how our dollars are working harder, that's a reasonable aspiration for anyone who's spending.
I mean, one thing, I guess the way that I see this from the publisher perspective is, I think from an advertiser perspective, they have their set of partners that they work with, and they've cobbled together their solutions of how they're going to identify audiences and measure success. But then from our perspective, we have hundreds of different advertisers who all have their own different partners, and then we have to integrate all of those. So that's a pain point, I think, from the publishing side that we face, of lack of standardization and lack of similar tool sets across the industry that makes it really, really difficult. So all we do is pilots. Like, all we're doing is pilots and work with different vendors to try to figure out what we can do with different advertisers and partners and case studies and what's working and what's not working. And we have to have whole teams dedicated to this now. So I think, I know we were going to talk a little bit about standards, but for us, something that, would be great. It reminds me of different ad formats, but now it's even more complex, and it's just a ton of work from the sell side,
I mean, I don't know that we should be solving for that with a single metric. I mean, we're going to have some channels, some streaming partners that are great at long tail, and they're going to deliver some metrics, and we're going to have some, big partners with high reach that are going to want to deliver reach as a metric, and we're going to have some advertisers that are moving from digital up to CTV, and they're going to want to measure different things to the big P&Gs of the world. And everybody wants to measure different things as a success outcome, and trying to force them into a single measure is difficult. And I don't know that that's rewarding to them as advertisers, as brand spenders, that it's going to be a success. And, if we, again, come back to an identity, that would be a focus that would really help us to achieve a view of how we're spending our money effectively, even if we're negotiating different metrics with different vendors or different shows.
Even as an agency, am I allowed to ask a question?
Yeah, please.
Okay.
Please,
I don't want to
please.
I'm curious.
No one
but
wants to hear from me all the time.
From an agency perspective, are you trying to get all of the brands that you work with into a single set, either, solutions that you're developing or kind of a set of partners that's consistent, across your agency?
I mean, we have favored partners with whom we've cut deals for sure, but not specifically. I mean, we are a media independent, so we're not, obliged to spend with Epsilon. But sure, we have cut deals. We have favored pricing with certain vendors, absolutely. But that's not to say we won't explore anything with anybody, and we will cut different metrics depending on what the client requirements are. And I think that's where we should be starting. We don't always do it, but that's where we should be starting, is what the client end goal is. And
Which is an interesting question. It comes up a lot. I'll just want to sort of clarify what you're saying, is that we really, the whole notion of having this one single Nielsen currency doesn't make sense in streaming anymore, is what you're saying. That it should almost be done the way digital is, where the two parties in the deal say, okay, this is how we're going to measure it, and and if we both agree to it, that's what matters.
The difference being you're not counting tabs. You're going to transact everything in identity, and you build measurement on top.
Right, but you'll have different standards and all that. Like, is that am I paraphrasing you correctly?
I think we're already there.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the world now.
It's an ephemeral concept, right? It's somebody willing to do a transaction on the basis of something, right?
Right.
So, is it calibrated to deterministic data at scale? Is it somebody writing some numbers on the back of a beer mat? That's currency. That's a medium of exchange.
Oh, Jason, just get a new. So now, Charbel, I mean, do you think we're going to lose something, or I shouldn't say we're going to lose something. Does the industry feel like that's okay? In other words, because one of the things that people who are so used to Nielsen, have trouble wrapping it seems to me they have trouble wrapping their heads around basically what Tom just said. Even though it is logical, how much a hassle is it going to be to get these people, Charbel, to kind of switch their thinking?
Time to retire.
Oh my God! Are you trying to ask me to solve the problem for the industry now?
No. Just
No.
you can say these idiots don't get it, and we need to bang them about the head.
I mean, it's all about. There are a lot of people talk about education. I mean, this is something that we've been talking about it for 2 days now. Education is fundamental for everybody, whether we want to be able to do one currency or multiple currencies or alternative currencies. We believe in creating all the or helping our partners to create innovation, play a role of accelerating innovation in terms of currency or multiple currency, which we believe actually in multiple currencies, depending on the use cases, depending on who's doing what. The most important part for me is how do we in this case, where's Jody? Jody is here. You guys figure out who's the we in this case. We as Inscape. All we do is trying to fuel and accelerate the innovation around the currency and measurement, right? We invest a lot in that area. We invest a lot on making our data as transparent as possible for everybody, for our customers. We support the scale, we support the quality of the data, we support the consistency of the data. I'll talk, whenever I have a little bit more time, I'll talk about everything we're doing in terms of supporting these alternative currencies and all the customers we have today in this forum.
Maybe we could have a show of hands for anybody who's ever had a conversation with a client hoping to maintain a Nielsen monopoly.
Yes.
I mean, there's no demand for it. Nobody wants to maintain a Nielsen monopoly. It's not a requirement.
I mean, maybe it's being done less for pure innovation than for improving programmer economics. Yeah. But I totally agree. I mean, the fact that there was a monolithic structure for so long is surprising.
Right, but I mean, don't you find that? I mean, people say, "Oh, I don't want Nielsen. I don't trust them. I don't believe them." But then when they're actually faced with having to deal with multiple currencies, suddenly, "Oh my God, it's so confusing. I can't deal with this. I'm just going to buy linear on Nielsen."
Our media buyers might say that, but I don't know if clients are saying that. I mean, people with the money aren't saying that.
I just saw an hour ago, right? DAR is going to be in Netflix first, right? That DAR panel that has pissed off every programmer in here for 15 years on a make good on a panel that's small, even though it's digital, you know, and you don't get to optimize against DAR. You just have to fire their pixel and then make good against this mystery number. And that's the first thing going into Netflix. So that's
I think there's
not ideal.
I mean, to build on this point, I think there's always a back solving to Nielsen in some way, whether it's our architecture at 605 is at a household level, right? We think it makes sense. It's the locus where most content is consumed. It contains 2.53 people. But whenever we talk about that architecture, people say, yeah, but can you foot it back to personification, to people? So Jan's in the room. I think he's built a very successful business on doing just that. But there are multiple back reaches to Nielsen from a legacy perspective.
Yeah, it seems to work. So I'll stick with you on this one. In a similar vein, should we be measuring ads on streaming, ads and programming separately? There doesn't really seem to be a reason to measure them together anymore, right?
Well, you can. So that's as good a reason as any. And I mean, to put some context on that, there will be certain brands who will want to see the adjacency, right? So why would you not, if you have the technical ability, measure everything and then allow your customers to make the decision on how they want to see it? And, you know, we were talking before the session, it's interesting, Inkscape data is almost becoming a de facto standard across the industry. We build on top of it, but it's that sort of consistency around the underlying data, both from an ad perspective and a content perspective, which for me, it seems crazy you wouldn't capture both.
This is one of the powerful things that ACR delivers, right? The fact that we detect on a second-by-second basis and not every 15 minutes. You can actually separate and detect the ads, measure the ads, not necessarily the program, which makes it more difficult in a streaming environment for programs. But for the ads, we can measure the ads on a second-by-second basis in the streaming and in linear and do a cross-platform measurement for using the ACR data.
Now, Steffi, what's your take on this? Given, like you were talking about, quality and quality of where the ad is running and the programming and all that.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I think about like from an optimization perspective, right? The more data that you get about where and how people are tuning in outside of the pre-testing that you do, which is what used to happen, right? Because you didn't actually know that from, the measurement on the back end, I think is incredibly valuable data, obviously, for planning purposes. Right. So I would always, get things at the most granular level possible to be able to understand what's resonating within that creative and understand how that differs between programs, across programs, time of day, et cetera, from a creative development perspective.
If we can keep a list of what our programmatic streaming adverts went in away from our clients, we are very happy because it's all from the 1980s. And I mean, the list of what gets served, even if it hits the right audience, is not great. It's not an impressive list. Clients don't want to see that. They're not that happy when they see it. They like the results. They like the fact it hit their right customers. We get the right segment. Did it go to, what they would class as, the shows that they would typically have picked in an upfront package when they went on, they bought in the upfront from CBS? No, absolutely not.
But they know that. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, that's why they're spending less money,
Maybe
right?
in their lizard brain they know that, but, we don't articulate that.
But it's breathtaking they accept that as the status quo.
Yeah.
Like, they're the ones who have the loudest voice in changing things.
I haven't heard a lot of conversation when we've gone through it. I haven't heard a lot of conversation about changing it because we're hitting the right audience. They're accepting the CPM. I mean, that is part of the trade-off, that you want to buy a long tail and shows that do, 1,000 impressions. That's fine. And you should. We keep them away from bad quality. We keep them away from content that is offensive. Absolutely. But is that content stuff that you would pick out of a schedule and say, I want to be in the, show from the 1980s or first series of Grey's Anatomy? Maybe, maybe not.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's often like,
Jay?
in the LiveRamp's Data Plus Math platform, we do mainly lift analysis, right? So various, whether it's advertiser data or many different partners, we calculate lift. it softens the blow that you got, the Beverly Hillbillies channel for 10,000 impressions. Right. If your sales lift improved and the effective CPM made your overall return on ad spend look better. But if you're not calculating lift and you're just looking at reach, then title, I think, is more troublesome if you're getting a lot of that.
But impact is, right, but that's why we're measuring outcomes.
Yes.
Identity and outcomes is a critical measure of effectiveness.
Right, but the more performant the content is, the more people are going to charge for it. If Beverly Hillbillies, right, is delivering, 3x
that is
the
a channel
ROAS
out there on Fast World.
then you'd assume that the market dynamics would mean that you'd be charging 3 times as much for it, right?
Absolutely. But that worryingly takes us back to an upfront model, right? Where I want to start to pick and choose. If I want to pick my content, I want to be specific. That's an upfront model.
Right. The seller doesn't always know, though. If the Beverly Hillbillies is delivering all that sales lift, the advertiser might know, but the seller might not. So they might not be able to change price.
It depends who's doing the measurement, right? But like that's basically how things are priced. It's like supply, demand, performance, right?
Yeah.
Should be in like a real market.
Right. I mean, actually, oddly enough, it seems that programming ratings are an issue because as suddenly streaming production ground to halt, all of these production companies, and Netflix and other companies starting to cut shows. They're like, wait, we think a lot of people are watching our shows, and they're like, yeah, you'll never know, because they don't share program ratings. So that has actually, oddly enough, become more problematic. But what you guys are talking about brings up something very interesting that's come up on a couple of other panels, which is this whole issue of transparency. That when you buy linear TV, you know what you bought generally down to the ad pod and the position in the ad pod. And a lot of times when you buy programmatic, it's like, yeah, it ran. Where? On our platform. When? Last week. And that's, it hit your target. What do you care? And like, so.
I mean, you do know. I mean, you absolutely get a report out of where it ran. It's not a secret. I mean,
really? Because I hear I have heard that there are.
You'll know after. You may not know ahead of time, but you'll know after.
Really? Because I have heard from a number of people that is not the case. That they have a lot of trouble finding what show on, especially on streaming platforms, what show on the streaming platform it ran against, and then just the whole context issue. I have a funny commercial. Did it run against the funeral scene? Like,
yeah, you're not going to know necessarily what show. You're going to know time of day, and you're going to know when it ran. But you're not necessarily going to pick up the context.
Yeah, you may not have title.
That's right.
Yeah,
that hasn't been solved yet.
Right, and title seems to be the big
scale.
thing because, say, on certain streaming services that also make sticks, they have a wide range of content, right? They have network reruns, and then they have Susie's yoga studio that her sister shoots on her iPhone, with a ring light. And there's, and that seems to be a fear. And you're saying you don't hear that from your clients?
Well, I mean, as with all video buys, we're setting up, do not buy lists. We're setting up parameters about what we don't want to be in. I mean, there's content guidelines that get set up. And then, following on from that, there is, the wider the context of trying to find the right target, the better deal we're going to get. And that's where you pays your money and you takes your choice as to, how narrow you want to be and how focused you want to be in content to find the right audience. It's part of that planning process to make those decisions.
I mean, look, I'm going to go back to another theme. There's no technical reason why this obfuscation happens, right?
Yeah,
it's just, it is a lack of, it is actually.
Yes.
Yeah. And, okay, who can change it? Brands, because they got the strongest voice, because they're spending the dollars, but it's also predicated on programmers supporting it. And these are all, in my mind, they're all just modes of delivery, a way of delivering content. Yeah.
Right, you're right. And what I have, just to bring you guys in, which is great. Like I'm very happy we have audience participation here. Is what I've heard is that there's a fear of cherry picking, that we're not going to tell you because you're not. We have a lot of shows that we know you're not going to want to run on.
If you're buying an audience, you're making a trade-off. You're not buying title, you're buying the audience.
Right.
That's right. And there's tiering, right? Like if you look at like a media plan, like a direct media plan, for example, if you want to run in Harry Potter, you can run in Harry Potter, right? The CPM might be $20 to run in Harry Potter, like display, right? If you have an RON, run of network line item, we're not going to tell you, you're going to run on the network and maybe it's $6. You're making that decision, right? And that's how we tier inventory, right? Like there's premium inventory and there's less premium inventory, and that's intentional, right? And that's how we segment basically demand based on how important that is to you and how important we think it is, what the demand, you want The Office, like you're going to pay for The Office. I was at NBC during The Office. I know it's not relevant anymore, but
No, it still is. Oh my God, it's certainly
another
is.
great show. But yeah, I mean that's the whole dynamics of pricing and premiums and.
I mean, that was the package that we used to buy on cable way back when. You'd buy, you could buy some line items, and you'd have a package of the less premium content to go along with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think
efficiencies, right.
what I'm getting is from people, when I talk to people about this, is that the less premium content is way, way, way less than it had been on NBC. That there's.
I mean, yeah, there's a lot more content, right? But maybe the audience is better. I mean, that's a context versus audience question, because you might have something that you don't consider premium because 18 people in Nebraska watch it, right? But those people are obsessed and they're like right in your demo.
Yeah.
So from an audience perspective, they might be very valuable, but they're not that sexy, like shiny, line item that we're going to go out and sell.
I'm also going to assume that, if you're buying late night on a micro channel on TV, you're actually going to get measured real people, as opposed to if I used to do that on cable, where Nielsen would report a 0.0, and you'd add all those up to get one person after, 1,000 spots, and none of them were real. So at least we're measuring real people in the audience that we want in those micro channels. So, this is an advance.
And to pull it back to outcomes, they might be in the market for a new car, or they're heavy QSR visitors, right? This is right back to the point about performance is the most important metric, right? Business outcomes.
Yeah, so on our side, on the Visio side, we definitely on our platform, we focus on this granular data to be able to plan based on audience, right? For streaming side, we don't have the content. We don't know what content, but we know the audience that are actually on our TVs, whether from the linear side as well as enough data from the streaming side. We can create segment. This is what we're doing. This is not something that is story. We create segment based on their viewing behavior, how much they have been reached, exposed versus unexposed on linear, and we see the frequency that is spiking on linear for a bunch of TVs, and we help our partners during the planning process on how to target and address these audiences on the streaming side of the platform and measure a better distribution of frequency and reach within these audiences. This is the fact that we are able to measure second by second is definitely a huge benefit for our partners to work with to work with Visio on that.
Right, and if I get them in Beverly Hillbillies, well, that's great. I mean, that's a benefit, because you've got somebody who's a light viewer who you've not hit with linear.
So I'll take, because we sort of our next question is, given, and especially one of the things that ACR does is measure both streaming and linear, which is great, because that's the other thing. We're at this weird place now where we've got this hybrid ecosystem where people watch both linear and streaming, and they don't do it in any consistent manner. Say, for instance, somebody may be a big football fan, and they watch football on TV on linear all fall. Come the Super Bowl, they're like, wow, there's all those shows on streaming that I didn't get to watch all fall. I'm just going to watch streaming for the next 3 months, and then they go back and forth. So it's sort of hard to classify people in that. So how do you solve for that, Jay?
I mean, here's the reality of if you really want to try to get measurement that is satisfactory from the advertiser's point of view. You'll need ACR data that also has some streaming data, but it's only certain apps that Charbel's allowed to get, and you may not have title information, but you'll have the app. Then you will need set-top box data to get more density at a national level, especially if you're trying to do sales lift. The secret sauce is ACR plus set-top box. That gives you enough, what the data scientists would call feasibility to give you that attribution lift. Then you may have some pixels where pixels are still firing that are the advertiser's pixels. Increasingly, the sellers will give you access to their ad server logs, so maybe now you're going to process freewheel logs, and programmer Y has picked Snowflake as that environment, so now you have to be able to process those ad logs in Snowflake. Then you have to put all that together And then you can start to create metrics, lift, and all of those things. So the cost of all this is immense, and the complexity is immense. But you really need all those components to actually do this right. Otherwise, you're only doing it in a piecemeal way.
I mean, that stuff is being done today, right? The problem, well, there are two problems. The first is it's complex and it needs really heavy lifting from a data science perspective. But the concept of building as many accretive data sets around a core viewership data set, which will almost certainly be comprised of his data plus set-top, that's the model. I think there's a problem, which is where do you draw the line? These are expensive data sets, right? And there's a risk that people who do what we do have a problem with unit economics, right? You're buying data, you're monetizing at a level below where you should be. So I think this will be an industry-wide problem.
Or the cost of measurement gets very high, and then it's prohibitive to use multiple providers, and then you get inertia back towards a single one. So that is a problem.
Yeah, and I think that's a risk.
Yeah. Sure, Bill, as they're attacking you. No.
I promised them I wasn't going to go there. I did.
People asked me to make a discount. No, no. We invest a lot of money in terms of scale and being able to support the industry. Just in this last 12 months, we added 200 local channels to support the industry. We added a lot of 100 channels redundant to make sure that our data is consistent. All of this, it costs a lot of money. So we take this very seriously from supporting the alternative currencies and the currencies. I agree with a lot of being said. It's a difficult problem to solve. It's solved, but there's still a lot of work to be done to make it more accessible to everybody in terms of data sets.
Hey, the other thing we love about your data is it's available next day, right? So when you look at optimization and actually influencing the curve, that's data that allows that to happen very quickly.
I feel biased right now. I can't talk about that.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's great. And a little plug. There's guys in the back, they're from a company called CCR, they're basically, if ACR is a Shazam, kind of where you take this, and you match it up against a database, they are the database that for linear and broadcast that Vizio stuff is matched against. So, and I'm always surprised a lot of people don't even know that it's like against a database. Well, where's the database? I don't know, So it was kind of like 5 years ago when you would ask people how ACR worked, and they would think there was a little man in the TV shouting out, "He's watching Modern Family now." So, okay, we'll let the laugh line go. So I do have one last question. So one of the things, we're talking about Vizio data and all that, and I'm going to open up for questions. When Google and Facebook go in and argue for that $300 million budget, one of their big arguments is we know where every dollar is spent. We know every user and what happened to every ad. And the TV guys, they're just guessing. That's not necessarily true, but that's their argument. And if you're an insecure brand manager, that can be a really compelling thing to hear that, they're basing it off of, 22 million? What are you up to now?
Officially 20 million opted-in TVs, closer to 21. But
right, and even if you factor in, LG or somebody else, you're still not at the whole universe. You're not at the whole universe. Does that matter? Like should you? How does TV argue back and say, you know what? Like it's really off of 20 million homes, it's really close, and you factor in the other data, and we can actually do this. Is that about How do you convince the brand?
It's stats. If you are doing planning and measurement, 20 million opted-in TVs, that represent 15%, 13% of the U.S. population, TV population, or TV household, sorry.
Yes.
Thank you. That's a huge sample. We've been doing 40,000 U.S. household for years. I don't know. Is that a good answer or not?
Yeah.
I mean, there's another way of coming at this, which is to say, when do you have enough? And, again, I talked about unit operating economics and the crippling costs of adding data sets, not just licensing them, but also persistent storage, having them in a tech stack. It's wildly expensive. Pick a number. If you're present in 25% of US TV homes, is that good enough? Is a third right? It's probably in that range. Otherwise, the economics just get screwed up for the industry.
I mean, for me, so my background's in research, and certainly 20 million is, and we talk about like significance and sample. The question really is around like representativeness for me, right? And if it is representative, I would say certainly sufficient. But, are there demographics or different groups that are being kind of left out versus the larger rep look that you're going to get on a large platform?
May I comment on this one?
Of
It's
course.
perfect timing for me.
You cannot answer. We're going down the line.
You're right. You're absolutely right. Representative plays a key role in all this. The main thing with Visio is that it's a loved brand. So a lot of people buy Visio, even without doing any corrections on the representatives. And soon we're going to announce a new product that is called NRP, which is National Representative Panel, across the whole population, the 20 million. Right? We are still aligned to a high degree with the U.S. Census. And then soon we're going to, within the coming days, we're going to announce our new product, which is an incremental to help our partners calibrate our panel, our 20 million panel against the census from a demographic and geographic point of view. So I agree, we take this very seriously. We invest in all the aspects that makes our data the main ingredient for the currency and alternative currencies.
Mr. Prasad.
I mean, that's really helpful. I wish you would have told me that a few months ago. We had to buy a survey from the ARF and do it manually. But that is exactly the...
I've said this probably. Yeah.
But representativeness, I mean, I think there's like a hurdle rate, right, where advertisers believe that, hey, and you show them, right, you show them the math that, hey, at 40 million total reporting TV households, you're getting just as much precision as what a walled garden is going to tell you. And if the sales lift and the reach numbers consistently over time, they can see that, yes, my business improves, and the measurement you're telling me aligns with the business improvement, then you're on the same footing. But I just don't think there's an expectation that you're going to match what Google is able to do.
I mean, I can't possibly compete with all the technical answers. So I'm going to take it the other way, which is, I mean, you asked about Google. I wouldn't talk about Facebook, but Amazon, do they know where all the dollars are spent, right? And yes, they kind of do at the end, but I would never trust a Google or an Amazon with why are we spending in TV in the first place, right? We're not spending in TV, so somebody goes out and immediately clicks on an Amazon website that minute to go purchase, right? It's a brand investment to build brands, to build sales over time, to build brand equities, all of those things wrapped up together. And so, we don't want a vested interest starting to measure how we are, should be thinking about TV as a measurement and as an investment channel.
Last click bias too, right? I mean, Google can claim every sale, right?
Right.
But it doesn't mean they influenced it. And that's what everyone in this room is always working to do, is showing how video and TV influence a lot of purchasing decisions.
Right, which is certainly not as easy to prove out as, yes, they saw the banner ad for the thing that cost $3.99 and clicked on it and bought it.
I bought some, if I'm somebody's in market for a, whatever it is, for a widget, and then they go and buy a widget, then we show them an ad, then they buy a widget on Amazon. Does Amazon claim all the credit? Sure they do. But, we've targeted somebody who was in market in the first place. So that's part of the audience, the ID, the process, the build-up of the demand in the first place that's got them to that stage. All of that stuff requires credit, which if we trust a Google or an Amazon to purely measure the effect of TV, that's not going to work.
Exactly. So we've got about 5-ish minutes back. We have 5 smart people and me up here. So if you guys, and we've got a pretty big crowd here, so if you guys have any questions for this audience,
Feels like there's comments that are ready to happen from the audience. Gabe, you're laughing. Come on. Give him that.
Come on,
give him
okay,
that thing.
so someone's going to want to ask
That
you a
square.
question, right? Nobody has any questions for these guys. I bet you're just shy. No one wants to be the first one. Should we all look at Stoyer? Okay, Gabe, go.
Why can't the agency
Wow. Wow.
Rob, why can't you
what I mean by that, right, is, to your point, you've been buying broadcast in and upfront, targeting primetime television, thinking that that's the media that's spending billions of dollars, right? You're now doing an audience strategy, assuming presumably also still including that prime
Yep.
first run inventory. If the audience isn't watching that, doesn't that tell you that perhaps you've been wasting billions of dollars?
Well,
Like, as opposed to saying it's the wrong content, isn't it more of an, like, shouldn't we be educating the clients that actually we now have the precision and we can change the dialogue, change the conversation? Not to say that everything in CTV needs to be performance-based. We also have to change that dialogue. We have to be more organic.
right.
But
I mean, you don't hear a lot of agencies say, cut your spend, it's useless. I think the audience is changing. I mean, things are moving quite quickly. And so, our response to that and our advice to clients is that we have to move with the audience consistently. Agency client spend was behind the game on mobile for a long time. Client spend is probably still behind the game on CTV. Our recommendation is not necessarily that, but it's what clients are comfortable with. We run a lot of marketing mix modeling to inform us whether things are working or not in a broad term. We see impact. But the truth is, advertising doesn't drive 100% of sales. If we believed Google plus Facebook attributed spend would be, clients would be selling 140% of their total sales. But we know 70, 80% of sales would be business as usual, right? Even if you cut all marketing spend, they're still going to be working. So, our advice continues to change. That's why money is flowing, partially, it's why money is flowing into these new outlets. Does it lag the audience? Yes, it does. And it did on mobile, it did on digital, it will do continually. But, that's a process of education and a process of proving out the worth of different channels.
But how do we shift the dialogue when a client says, well, that's not, that first run show has been buying forever and it's Beverly Hillbillies. I don't want to be in Beverly Hillbillies. Well, I'm sorry if that's what's actually driving your floor traffic, your sales, your web traffic, whatever it is. Why does that matter? Why can't we flip the conversation and use that as an education?
I mean, oftentimes we're not having that conversation about what the content is that we're showing on in programmatic in the long tail. And we see a lot more clients now who were digital only, who now come to us and say, I need to do some more upper funnel work. I want to do some branding. CTV offers me the opportunity. I can go local, geo, targeted with certain audiences. So we can start to move, up the funnel as well as, converting down funnel from broadcast.
Golden Girls channel for that.
I'm Beverly Hills all the way.
Okay. So you have time for one last question. Anyone? Any hands? Okay. Well, thank you guys very, very much. This was great.